My husband arrived one evening with his high school ex, a woman named Allison, and announced, as if it were a casual favor, that she'd be staying with us. I'm a 27-year-old who's been married to Jacob, 28, for nearly 2 years, and now our marriage seems to be unraveling over what happened just 3 days ago. A couple of evenings back, Jacob returned home with a woman from his high school days. Her name was Allison. I assumed they had bumped into each other at the mall, so he'd simply invited her over for dinner. I welcomed her with the same cordiality I offer any guest, yet as the meal progressed, an unsettling aura clung to her every word. The way she whispered old inside jokes with Jacob hinted at a secret past, and by the close of dinner, I yearned for her departure. Every casual touch, her hand grazing his arm, her constant, exaggerated laughter at his jokes, even the dull ones, sent shivers of discomfort through me. After dessert, I hoped she'd leave, but 2 long hours ticked by. By 10 p.m., when she still hadn't gone, I cornered Jacob and demanded to know what the hell was going on. Only then did he confess that he had purposely invited her over because she'd been evicted, unable to pay rent for the past 4 months. Apparently, she was slated to spend the night, perhaps even a few days, until she could secure a new apartment. Jacob also revealed that their meeting hadn't been a random mall encounter at all. They'd reconnected on social media and had been chatting online for weeks. That's how he learned she needed a place, prompting him to offer our home as a temporary refuge. I was livid that he'd made such a decision without consulting me, and I told him flatly that I wasn't comfortable sharing our home with someone whose odd behavior around him had left me reeling. He dismissed my anxiety as overblown, insisting he was only helping a friend in need. I demanded she leave immediately. I wouldn't put up with this invasion. But he replied that he'd already promised her a stay and couldn't break her heart by asking her to go. All her belongings were packed in the car, and she had, in fact, moved out of her apartment that very day with his help. Acting increasingly evasive, he then forced me to ask, "Who exactly is Allison?" To my horror, he admitted that she wasn't just a friend, she was his ex from high school, the girl he'd left behind in his senior year when college beckoned. My heart pounded in disbelief. The notion of his ex living with us, especially when it seemed sparks might still fly between them, was unbearable. Jacob assured me that his relationship with Allison was long over, but my insecurity only deepened. I insisted that both of us had to leave this farce behind immediately. Furious, I threatened that if he didn't order her out, I would walk out myself. Instead of taking me seriously, he coolly countered that if I couldn't handle Allison living with us, then I was free to leave. He claimed he was merely helping a friend in distress, and if my feelings were so fragile, then I was the problem. With that, he strode out of the room, leaving me isolated in our bedroom. I was stunned. After 2 years of marriage and nearly 3 years of dating before that, I should have meant more to him than some girl from his high school fling. In the heavy silence that followed, I struggled to find words. When I re-entered the living room, I found Jacob perched on the couch beside Allison, both of them laughing at a sitcom playing on TV. As if to rub salt in my wound, Allison had the nerve to beckon me to sit with them before sliding over so that she'd be uncomfortably close to Jacob, forcing me into her personal space as she cozied up to him. I retreated to our bedroom, hastily stuffed a bag with my things, and then returned to the living room, no longer caring that Allison was there. I told Jacob, in a voice trembling with hurt and anger, that he needed to kick her out immediately so we could sort this mess out, or I would leave for good. He said nothing, his lips pursed as he deliberately looked away, while Allison rose and addressed me in a saccharinely false tone. She claimed she meant no harm, that she was merely an old friend, and that this arrangement was simply how things would be. Then, with an infuriating chirp, she turned to Jacob and said, "Right, Jake?" Even though I knew well how much he despised being called that. I could only sigh deeply before slamming the door behind me with all the force I could muster. Jacob didn't chase after me, nor did Allison. Clearly, this was exactly what she'd planned all along. Though a part of me felt unsettled by the whole affair, my gut insisted I had to watch what happened next. Luckily, our curtains were never fully drawn, and I caught sight of them immediately after I left. Jacob and Allison now sat side by side, whispering in low tones that unmistakably revolved around me. Jacob's face bore the weight of displeasure, and then, to my utter shock, he reclined and rested his head in Allison's lap as she tenderly stroked his hair. Enraged beyond words, I whipped out my phone and snapped a picture of them in that intimate moment, ensuring both of their faces were unmistakably captured. Once I secured the evidence, I decided I no longer needed to stick around. I walked all the way to a friend's house, deliberately foregoing my car because my mood was too shattered to drive. I needed the long, reflective walk to cool the boiling rage inside me and to plot some form of retribution against Jacob. Before reaching my friend's door, I went online and posted the picture with a curt caption, "Cheater," and nothing else. When I finally knocked, my friend let me in, glanced at her own social media, and immediately demanded to know what my post was all about as soon as she saw me. Once we settled on her couch, I spilled every painful detail of the evening. She warned me that I'd gone too far. Comments were already pouring in, drenched in venom toward both Allison and Jacob. Although she agreed that Jacob needed to be called out, she cautioned that sharing such an intimate snapshot could land me in legal trouble if things escalated. I listened and, with a heavy heart, deleted the post, even as texts kept coming urging me to restore it, insisting that was exactly what Jacob deserved. While it was comforting to see so many on my side, her blunt reality check stung. People were more interested in the scandal than in my shattered emotional state. Realizing that the drama was consuming me, I turned off my phone and sought solace in distraction. It was late when I arrived at my friend's place, and eventually, I succumbed to sleep. The next morning, my friend informed me that Jacob was waiting in the living room. He had arrived minutes before I awoke, and despite her efforts to send him away, he refused to leave without confronting me. I braced myself, expecting an apology that I was ready to reject given my hardened heart. But stepping into the living room, I was met not with "I'm sorry," but with a furious barrage. "Are you insane? What the heck were you even thinking?" His words seethed with anger, a reaction to my post that now seemed to have spiraled out of control. He went on to reveal that someone had sent that picture to his parents, and now they had cut him off entirely, a disastrous blow since he'd planned to quit his job and launch his own business. He needed his father's money, and with his dad refusing to invest and his mother ignoring his calls and texts, his future was in jeopardy. He explained that his parents hadn't even offered an explanation for blocking him, yet he was convinced my post was the trigger, since it appeared right after I uploaded that photo of him with Allison. Now, he demanded that I call his parents and convince them it was just a prank, a desperate plea to mend their broken communication and save his future. I probably would have apologized to him had he not demanded that I speak to his parents and make everything all right again. I couldn't believe he had the nerve to make demands. His entitlement seethed like acid, and I fired back that he'd earned every bit of this for cheating on me. He coolly insisted that Allison was just a friend, accusing me of reading too deeply into nothing. Then, with a venomous edge, he labeled me insecure, jealous, and toxic, even claiming that once I stormed out, Allison had consoled him, hence his head resting in her lap. According to him, that was all there was. Nothing funny had happened afterward because that simply wasn't his style. I told him I no longer trusted a single word he uttered and demanded he leave, refusing to waste another minute on this charade. In my eyes, his emotional entanglement with Allison was as plain as day, something I witnessed with my own eyes, leaving no room for cover-ups. Even if I tried to erase the haunting image of his head cradled on her lap, it was indelibly burned into my memory. He had chosen to let her stay with us, despite my desperate ultimatum for him to choose between us, and he chose her. That betrayal was something no woman in my shoes could ever accept. I ordered him out, and he eventually did, but not before ominously warning me that this wasn't over. His parting threat lingered, and soon enough, my phone buzzed relentlessly with his texts, pleading for me to call his parents and fix everything. My friends argued that I should confront his parents or take some action, insisting that even though his betrayal was grave, I shouldn't have exposed that intimate photograph of him with Allison. They claimed a simple post would have sufficed instead of a blatant invasion of privacy. As much as I understood their point, I couldn't simply forget what Jacob had done to me. I'm convinced Allison still lives with him. My blood boils at the thought of them together in my own home. I feel compelled to act, yet I find no sympathy left for him. I even questioned whether I was the villain for posting that damning image of my husband, his head nestled in his high school ex's lap after he blatantly chose her over me. Update 1. I decided not to contact my in-laws or take any further steps because, as I stated before, my husband doesn't deserve any kindness right now. If he wants to fix this mess, he must do it himself. I'm not running to his parents for forgiveness when I can't forgive him. It's been 4 days since my post and nearly a week since Allison arrived, and I'm almost certain she's still here. I even created a fake account to stalk her, and every recent story she uploads shows a backdrop all too familiar, my own home. I can't fathom the sheer audacity of Jacob still allowing Allison to occupy our house, even after everything that's happened. But then, since every possible thing has already gone wrong, he might as well stay with her, because we're at the point of no return. I can't imagine ever returning to him, and he's probably not going to try. All he's done is text me incessantly, begging me to talk to his parents. I haven't blocked him yet, though I know it's only a matter of time before I cut him out completely. For now, I remain tethered to this crumbling history, too heartbroken to let go. My anger has cooled into a deep, aching sorrow. This is the end of our marriage, and I know it. It's ironic, never in my wildest nightmares did I suspect his betrayal. We'd been in love for years, he was utterly smitten with me from the moment we began, and once we were together, there was no looking back. Now, as it ends, shattered hardly captures the devastation I feel. My friends and parents have rallied around me, and while I appreciate their support, I'm overwhelmed by stress and uncertainty. I've already filed for divorce, and instead of feeling relief, I'm drowning in worry, so much so that I'm staying with a friend and working from home, too drained to face the world outside. Update 2, today, Jacob was served divorce papers. He called, demanding to know if I was serious, and when I confirmed, he erupted in a furious tirade. His voice was so loud I had to yank the phone away. He accused me of overreacting, insisting nothing untoward was happening between him and Allison. When I pressed him about whether she was still living with us, he hesitated before confessing that she had indeed been staying with him ever since I left. He claimed she had become his emotional support. After I stormed out, he had the gall to try to justify it by saying that without Allison's weird little friendship, he wouldn't have needed any comfort at all, a claim that made me bitterly laugh. I pointed out the irony, and he bristled, insisting that Allison always spoke highly of me and that it hurt him to see me treat her as a rival rather than a friend. I made it clear that this wasn't about what she thought, it was about him and our failed relationship. I told him I was divorcing him, not Allison, he was the one who let me down. I expected loyalty, a sanctity of our bond, and he utterly failed to prioritize my feelings over a high school fling. He dismissed me as being unfair and unreasonable, clinging to the notion that Allison was just a friend, again, as if that erased everything. Then he challenged me, asking what I would do if a friend of the opposite gender sought my help. I answered plainly, I'd help, but if my husband felt discomfort, I'd never hesitate to choose our marriage over any friendship. My marriage was paramount, and his indifference confirmed that he simply didn't value that bond. I would rather share my life with someone who truly understood this than with him. His tone then shifted to exasperation, chiding me for being overly emotional, told to manage my feelings like an adult instead of throwing a tantrum. He droned on about life's unfairness, but I wasn't listening. I disconnected the call, nearly ready to block him, when a text arrived accusing me of immaturity and claiming I wasn't the victim at all. According to him, my impulsive posting of that picture had cost him dearly, his parents had cut him off and his business plans were on hold. He expected even a simple apology from me, yet here I was, handing him divorce papers to punish him for helping a friend. In a swift reply, I apologized for posting the photo and added that, to even the scales, I might post a scandalous picture of myself with my guy friends, hoping that would force him to see things my way. Then I blocked him, severing the final thread of our connection. Update 3. We're now deep in settlement negotiations, and while the final divorce is still a ways off, yesterday Allison texted me, apologizing profusely for accidentally sleeping with Jacob. She claimed he'd been struggling with the divorce, and she was merely trying to comfort him, and that it just happened. I wasn't buying a single word, I knew she was saying it only to rub salt in my wounds. There's no way this was their first time after more than 3 weeks of living together. Frankly, I don't care anymore, I'm determined to rid myself of him, and if Allison must stick around, so be it. I no longer want him, and I'm convinced that a man who cheats once will do so again. If he could betray me, his wife of 2 years, then Allison would be deluding herself if she thought he wouldn't do the same to her eventually. In the end, it's none of my business, I'm out of here.